Here are the craziest executions in death row history, starting with the historic and heading straight for the absolutely absurd. We're exploring how far the limits of law and morality have been pushed in the past. Number 5. The chair's first victim. In 1890, a man named William Kemmler made history, but not the kind you'd brag about at parties. He was the first to take a seat in what would become the world's most notorious chair, not for its comfort, but for being the first electric chair execution. Before him, it was all ropes and hangings. Now let's look back and dive into this shockingly electrifying story. Pun intended. Born in 1860, Philadelphia, it was an era where electric bulbs were the latest craze. Kemmler's life was anything but bright. Raised in a home where alcohol was more common than water, he dropped out of school at the age of 10 to chop meat in his dad's butcher shop, leaving him illiterate.
Who needs school when you're this good with a cleaver?
Right on, kiddo. The only ABCs you need are for ale, beer, and cider.
Soon, both of his parents died early due to alcoholism complications, leaving him orphaned and lost in a sea of booze and bad decisions. His life took a dark turn after inheriting his father's temper and love for alcohol. It was this lethal combination that led him down a path from which there was no return. One fateful night of heavy drinking, he confronted his wife Tilly Ziegler over jealousy and theft accusations.
They say communication is key. I guess this hatchet is my way of expressing I feel neglected.
William, maybe try using your words next time?
I thought actions spoke louder.
In a chilling turn of events, he retrieved a hatchet from a barn and ended her life with multiple blows. This chilling act set the stage for a historical moment that would forever change the face of capital punishment. The morning of August 6, 1890 dawned like any other, except for Kemmler, who was about to make history in the most gruesome way. Dressed in his best suit, perhaps to meet his maker with some semblance of dignity, he was awakened early, prayed, and had his last meal.
Hey, do you think this suit makes me look electrifying?
It's certainly shocking. His head was shaved, not for a new fashion trend, but to make sure the electric current has a clear runway. As he entered the execution room, Kemmler greeted the onlookers with a,
"Gentlemen, good luck to you all. I'm going to a good place."
If only he knew. Strapped into the chair, Kemmler's last words before the switch flipped were,
"Take it easy and do it properly. I'm in no hurry."
Talk about keeping your cool. But the journey to the good place was far from smooth. The first jolt of 1,000 volts was supposed to be quick and humane, but here's the kicker. After 17 seconds, Kemmler was still alive, breathing, a testament to human resilience or perhaps the cruelty of an untested method. The crowd gasped.
Maybe try turning the power up a notch?
Cranking it to 2,000 volts. Hold on to your hats. This time, the second attempt was a real horror show. Blood vessels burst, the body caught fire, and the room filled with the smell of a barbecue gone horribly wrong. Witnesses could hardly stomach the sight, or the smell, of Kemmler turning into a human candle. The execution, meant to be a humane alternative that should have lasted seconds, turned into an 8-minute nightmare of horror that had everyone in the room wishing they were anywhere but there. The New York Times headline summed it up perfectly. Far worse than hanging. Even Westinghouse, the electric company guy, quipped,
"They would have done better using an axe."
Talk about a shocking review. And just like that, Kemmler's tale became a grim lesson in what not to do for future executions. So next time you think you're having a bad day, just remember, at least you're not William Kemmler. Number 4. Headless Queen's Drama. Off with a head! That was the real command given that ended the stormy life of Mary, Queen of Scots. It's a tale full of intrigue, betrayal, and a botched execution that is so bizarre and gruesome, it's still a hot topic centuries later. Let's rewind to the start of Mary's roller coaster life in 1542. Crowned queen as a baby right after her dad, King James V, said goodbye to the world.
Goo goo gaga. Wait, am I in charge now? This throne feels like a high chair. Aye, little one, you're the queen now. Best start ruling before nap time.
By 6, she's off to France to marry the future king, swapping playtime for royal schemes and a high-end Catholic education. But, plot twist, she's a teen widow. Her hubby, Francis II, checks out early and marries solo in Scotland again. There, she finds a religious battle. Mary tries keeping peace between Catholics and Protestants, but it's like mixing oil and water. Spoiler, it's a mess. Enter husband number 2, Henry Darnley. Their marriage was a roller coaster of drama and betrayal, ending with Darnley's mysterious, explosive death. Literally.
Well, that was unexpected. Note to self, maybe check husband number 3 for a less explosive personality.
Mary's next move, marrying the main suspect of her last husband's murder, Earl Bothwell. Because why not? Third time's the charm, or maybe not. She pondered, turning her life into a scandalous soap opera. Now enter Queen Elizabeth I, Mary's cousin and the reigning drama queen of England. She sees Mary not just as a royal headache, but as a real threat to her throne. When Mary gets caught up in a risky plan to take Elizabeth's crown, it's game over. Elizabeth's top spy, Sir Francis Walsingham, uncovers the plot.
Ah, Cousin Elizabeth, sending me an invite to the tower. How thoughtful.
It's an all-inclusive stay, Your Majesty, just without the leaving part.
Convicted of treason and facing her final moments in February 8th, 1587, Mary approaches death with dignity. Dressed in black and crimson, she gives her favorite crucifix one last kiss and ties a gold-bordered handkerchief to blindfold her eyes. As she approaches the block, a final spiritual spat with the Protestant dean showcases her unwavering faith.
Okay, God, here I come.
She says in old-school language, getting ready for the big chop. But guess what? The executioner swings and misses. It grazes the back of her skull instead of her neck, cutting through a bit of ligament. Sweet Jesus! Mary's heard groaning in pain. She probably thought, come on, you had one job. He swings the axe again. This time, it's a horrific mess as it nearly cuts off her neck, but the head doesn't come off clean. So now the annoyed executioner has to, cut through the remaining flesh with a saw. Yikes. Then in a twist, when he holds up the severed head by the hair to show everyone, it falls and rolls away, leaving in his hand only a red wig. Everyone gasps. There's Mary suddenly looking different, her gray hair showing, lips still moving. Talk about a dramatic reveal. But wait, there's more. As the executioner tries to take off her fancy garters, out pops her loyal dog, getting from her dress, like, hey, I'm here too. The poor little guy is so visibly confused and sad. And that Protestant dean who was all convert or else earlier, now forces Geddon's face into the blood that is pooled on the floor. He harshly commands, drink this, you beast! I know, gross. But Geddon's like, no way, and bites him instead. Good dog. In the end, they burn everything Mary ever touched, trying to erase her from history. Burning her belongings, that'll surely stop us from ever speaking of her again.
Yes, because fire famously makes things more forgettable, right?
So joke's on them because we're still talking about her crazy story today. From the botched execution to her loyal dog and the dramatic wig drop, Mary's exit was definitely one for the history books. Number 3. Vain Failure Horror. Before Clayton Lockett became the headline of one of the most jaw-dropping executions in American history, he started life on a tragic path. Let's dive into a story that begins with a boy lost to the system and ends in a manner so shocking, it's almost hard to believe it's not fiction. First, let's go back to the beginning. Imagine being born into a world where your welcome gifts are drugs and a future filled with crime. That was Clayton's start. Abandoned by his overdose mom at 3, his life wasn't anything like a fairy tale. His dad and brother, they were more into showing him how to be a tiny criminal than anything else. Imagine this, instead of 3 little pigs, they had the 3 little burglars.
Remember, son, It's not stealing if you don't get caught.
What's it called then? Creative borrowing?
No, it's called a successful transfer of ownership without the hassle of paperwork. Speed through a childhood filled with more warnings than a safety manual. And by 16, Clayton was already making pals in jail. Turning things around? Sadly, no. Jump to 1999, and things turned terribly wrong. Clayton and his gang did a home invasion in Perry, Oklahoma that was beyond terrifying. Imagine being 19, like Stephanie Neiman, caught in a nightmare you can't escape. Tied up, attacked, and then buried alive. It's the sort of horror that makes you doubt humanity. The community and the whole country were shocked. The courts easily pinpointed Clayton's pivotal role. In April 2014, Clayton faces grim finale in Oklahoma State Penitentiary amid a big problem with drug shortages. Their solution? A new drug combo never tried before. Earlier that day, a taser and self-harm set the scene for what turned into a nightmare. Imagine this: the medical team's desperate search for a vein, failing over and over. Arms, biceps, neck, collarbone, foot, until in a last resort move, on the 16th try, they went for the groin, making a bad situation even worse.
At this point, I'm more needle than man.
We're considering a career shift to acupuncture after this. At 6:23 p.m., they gave the first sedative, and all seemed to proceed as planned for a moment. Within minutes, Clayton, meant to be unconscious, struggled violently in pain, lifted his head and shoulders off the gurney, and gasped in agonizing snippets.
Oh man, I'm not.
Turning the scene into something more like torture than justice. Then they closed the curtains, hiding the awful end from journalists and his lawyers. A woman ran out of the room. It was like a horror movie. He kept trying to speak. Edith Scholes, a witness, recounted. This terrible ordeal, marked by the frightful phrase, vein failure, concluded with a heart attack, silencing the room in disbelief. What was supposed to be a quick exit, instead took 43 minutes, needed 16 needle punctures to find a vein, and ended with a heart attack that achieved what the execution team couldn't.
So, what went wrong?
We were aiming for quick and painless, ended up with slow and confusing. Sort of like my last relationship. An investigation uncovered the sad details: a vein that collapsed unnoticed, a lethal cocktail not fully delivered. This messed up procedure wasn't just a medical mistake, it was a story so chillingly surreal, it blurs the lines between execution and unintended cruelty. Number 2. Failed assassin's fate. In history, Robert Francois Damien's execution stands out for its sheer brutality, making it a show so gruesome for his failed assassination attempt. It might just be one of the darkest vengeance on Earth. Stick around as we unveil the scary details of Damien's last day that left the crowd both horrified and fascinated. Born in 1715 in the tiny village La Telouet, France, Damien's was pretty much a nobody. His dad was a gatekeeper, basically the human version of a keep out sign back in the day. Fast forward to January 1757, our man Damien's decides he's had enough of King Louis XV's antics. So I'm thinking of assassinating the king with a penknife. A penknife? What are you going to do? Write him a strongly worded letter to death? Armed with what could generously be called a penknife. Really, Robert? He tries, and spectacularly fails to assassinate the king. Spoiler, the king survives with just a slight wound. So why did Damien's do it? Picture a pot overflowing, symbolizing the huge gap and inequality between the rich and poor back then, pushing many to the brink. His trial became the town's biggest spectacle, leading to brutal torture for any accomplice names, yet he stayed silent. Now, are you ready for the shockingly harsh punishment that followed? March 28, 1757 started what could only be called the most terrible goodbye ever. Could you go easy on me? It's my first time being executed. Don't worry, I'll make sure it's your last. At dawn, Damien's whispered, "The day will be hard," an understatement for the nightmare ahead. His ordeal began with the boots, devices specially designed to painfully crush his legs, hinting at the horror to follow. For 4 relentless hours, executioners used red-hot pincers to tear off flesh from his body, showing no mercy. The hand that dared strike the king was burned with sulfur. Imagine, if you can, molten wax, boiling oil, and molten lead poured into his open wounds, showcasing the extreme depths of human cruelty. In a scene straight out of the darkest nightmares, the executioner, Charles-Henri Sanson, had a gruesome task. After cutting off Damien's private parts, in an unspeakable act, the real horror started. Then, in a scene right out of a horror flick, they tied his limbs to horses, ready to sprint in every direction like a gruesome tug of war. However, his limbs stubbornly resisted.
Yeah, seems like even the horses don't agree with the sentence.
Yeah, they're really appealing for him to get a lighter sentence.
The crowd watched in shock as Sanson had to cut through the muscles and tendons. Only then, in a horrific display, did the horses tear him apart. The horror didn't end there. Damien's, now just a torso, was screaming and burned alive at the stake. His remains turned to ash and scattered in the wind. The crowd, though initially shocked, erupted in applause, revealing a deep-seated thirst for vengeance. Damien's final moments, filled with cries for mercy amidst unbearable pain, remind us of a time when such barbarity was considered justice. This super harsh punishment, mixing pain, a big show, and people's weird love for dark stuff, leaves us questioning not just the past, but the very nature of our fascination with cruelty. Number 1. Horror Show Breakup. What drives a man to transform a tale of lost love into one of the most chilling chapters in death row history? This story turns a bad breakup into a nightmare. It's about Joseph Rudolph Wood III, whose heartbreak journey ended in a bloody spectacle. Picture this: Belton, Texas, 1958, a baby boy is born. Fast forward to 1989, and that boy, Joseph Wood, has turned his breakup with Deborah Dietz into a full-blown horror show. Their up-and-down love story, with lots of yelling and scary moments from Wood, ends when Deborah finally says, "I've had it." Wood, however, wasn't ready to let go. Fueled by obsession, Wood vandalizes their home and haunts Deborah with calls, some chillingly threatening. "I'm gonna take you with me." Despite Deborah's attempts to escape this nightmare by moving back with her family and getting a restraining order, Wood's shadow loomed large. "You know, they say love hurts, but I'm really taking it to the next level." On a fateful morning at the Dietz family's auto shop, Woods' final act unfolds. Fueled by rejection and rage, he storms in and coldly shoots Deborah's father, Eugene, in front of terrified employees. Then, with a smile, turns his rage towards Deborah, chasing her down. "No, Joe, don't!" she screams, but Woods' response? 2 shots to the chest, sealing his fate as a monster. The confrontation didn't end there. Wood, in a twisted game of cat and mouse, feigns surrender to the responding officers, only to reach for his weapon again, prompting them to shoot him. "Just kidding."
This is the worst game of peekaboo I've ever played.
Miraculously surviving the shootout, Wood was captured, tried, and sentenced to a fate that promised finality, death by lethal injection, plus an extra 30 years just to underline the point. But oh, if only things went as planned. July 23, 2014 was set to be Woods' final curtain call. Picture the scene: a room filled with witnesses, including the family's victim, an unapologetic man strapped to a gurney, and a concoction of drugs meant to send him off without a fuss. Sounds straightforward, right? Well, not quite.
So, this is supposed to be quick and painless?
Ever tried assembling furniture? It's supposed to be easy too.
As the drugs flowed, something was off. Wood, supposed to slip quietly into the abyss, started gasping, snorting, and gulping for air like a fish yanked from its bowl, flapping helplessly on the kitchen counter. Imagine, if you will, gasping for air not once, not twice, but over 640 times in what became a desperate struggle for breath. The room, filled with the loud sound of his struggle, mirrored a horror scene more than a lawful execution. He looked around, confused, his gaze locking with the eyes of those who came to witness his final moments. Was that a wide grin? Did he actually chuckle in the face of death? It seemed that even in his last moments, Wood was not done surprising us. In the audience, a priest prayed, lawyers squirmed, and witnesses, there to see justice served, questioned if what they were witnessing was justice at all. "I don't think he's gonna die," whispered one onlooker to another, their words hanging heavy in the air. Woods' body fought the concoction like a warrior in battle, but this was one fight that he was meant to lose. The drugs promised peace, but delivered torment. Picture this. Wood injected not once, not twice, but 15 times, turning the execution chamber into a scene from a very dark comedy. Each injection seems to ask, will this be the one? Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Well, this felt less like justice and more like a season finale cliffhanger.
I came to offer last rites, but I ran out of prayers and think I aged a decade.
As minutes turned to hours, the spectacle unfolded with a grim rhythm. Open mouth, heaved chest, convulsed stomach, the execution team peeking through the window might as well have been watching a tragic opera, with Wood playing the lead role he never auditioned for. Finally, after what seemed an eternity, Woods' gasps grew fewer, his struggles lessened, and the ordeal ended not with dignity, but with a grim sort of relief. The Arizona Department of Corrections later declared the experiment a failure. It's a stark, shocking reminder of when the final act of justice turns into an unintended circus, leaving us all to ponder the fine line between retribution and humanity's thirst for a spectacle. Just when you thought executions couldn't get any wilder, we've seen some of the craziest in death row history. But nature has its own dark side, with tales even more shocking. Dive into our next video, where we unveil the most horrifying deaths when humans mess with the wrong animals. You'll kick yourself if you don't see what's next. So, I'll see you there.